Hello and welcome to episode 168 of the world's first Paul Weller fan podcast. I'm Dan Jennings, and 10 years ago, I gave up my life stream and career as a radio presenter with one big regret. Never getting to interview my hero, the legendary singer, songwriter and musician, Paul Weller. This podcast exists purely to solve that issue. Welcome to Desperately Seeking Paul. And on this episode of the podcast, we chat to Sam Molnar and hear his incredible connections with Paul Weller from the Jam to now. We'll discover how he's become Sammy Carpet to the Weller family, how he created Wake Up Woking and an incredible homecoming gig in 2010, which featured live music from Paul Weller, Bruce Foxton and Steve Brookes, and Paul's first gig in his hometown for 30 years. More up to date, Sam came up with the idea for the Wildwood Garden at Woking Hospice, which Paul opened in 2022, raising further awareness and much needed funds for the hospice. Another cracking guest on the podcast. Let's get into it. Sam Molnar, thanks for joining me.
Really nice to be invited.
You've been a long-time listener to the podcast. You know what this is all about, right? And one thing that's been quite interesting, because there are lots of people who love listening to it, which is always very nice. But there's the odd person who says to me, oh, for Christ's sake, when are you just going to get to Weller? Like, this is my choice, right? So, it's up to Paul, obviously. But there are lots of people who go, oh, when are you going to get to Weller? Next, you're going to just get the bloke who delivers his post on. Now, technically, folks, what we have now is Paul Weller's official carpet fitter, right?
Well, not fitter, salesman, yeah.
Oh, okay. Do you get somebody else to fit it?
Oh, yeah, I don't do the hard work.
Now, I should say that also Paul has been a mate of yours for over 50 years. So not just the carpets, but a good friend of yours for over 50 years now, right?
Yeah. And it goes back a long way. Well, he was a friend of my brother's first. My brother Laz, he used to hang about with him and Dave Waller and Tony Pilot. And then one day I ended up round Stanley Road. According to my brother, John took us home in the cab one of those days as well. Do you know, the nicest thing is, and I'm going to say lots of nice things about Paul, but every time I see Paul, one of the first things he says after asking about Ange and the kids is, how's my brother?
Nice.
It's lovely. He's such a top man. So,
well, look, we're going to dig into these stories of the past 50 years. So let's start with the music. So when you first met Paul, was the Jam a thing? What year would this have been, roughly?
Yes, I couldn't tell you exactly, but I actually heard the Jam, believe it or not, in Shearwater Youth Club. They were recording in the hall, in the room out the back, and I was out the front. I don't know, we were always playing cards, 3-card brag and things like that when we were youngsters, and there was this awful racket coming from this room, and that's the first, seriously, that's the first time I ever encountered the Jam, yeah. To be honest with you, I've always said that I'm not a Jam fan. I like their stuff. I saw them quite a few times. I just got into own little bits of music. I never sort of was possessed by one genre of music and everything else. And I love some of the Jam songs and everything else. If I'm being honest, I love Paul's stuff now. I think it's brilliant. I love it.
You weren't a punk like Tufty then?
No, I actually think I was probably described as a suede head because I wasn't a skinhead. We all, even the Wellers, used to go to a place called Dazzles, and we used to get on tick our brogues, our loafers, our crombies, our tonic trousers, our Brutus shirts and everything else, always on tick, which was great. And I would have described myself as a suede head. I didn't, there were proper skinheads. I've never been associated being a mod. I couldn't tell you what that means, to be honest with you. It was what we were wearing. I mean, we were just chuffed we could get stuff like that on tick. Sometimes at home, me and my brother my mum said, switch the light off, he's coming around to collect the money because we didn't have it to pay. But the other thing is, Dan, and this is a true story. I saw Dazzle's son the other day, and everybody in Woking who knows Dazzle's, I saw the son, and he said, oh, I remember your family. And my older brother, God bless him, was deaf. So some of the other times, if we didn't have the money, Mum used to send him out, and he couldn't understand him. And before anybody gets in uproar, we're not the only family in Woking that did that.
So the music, you would have been listening to all kinds of music. I guess, yes, you're liking the Jam, but reggae was quite a big thing for the suede head.
My brother was into reggae. He was into The Who. He'd been to The Who at Charlton. He'd been to see Marley and stuff like that. And we had a friend who had probably the best reggae collection ever. So, we're into all that. And my elder sister, was into Motown. Never punk. But having said that, my wife was into punk and she dressed like a punk and things like that, So it was really funny because my wife used to live in Maybury, and she used to hang around with Paul and Tufty and all that lot, and they used to go down the pub and things like that. And just before I met my wife, or we were going out, it was her 18th birthday, and it so happened that she'd invited Paul to her 18th. So I saw Paul the other week round his mum's, and I said, "Oi, I've got a bone to pick with you." I said, "How come you got an invite to her 18th and I didn't?" She's known him for a long time as well. I suppose if I'm being honest, I've been a friend of the Weller family. You know, I know of Rick and Bruce, Brooksy, I know, which you'll see in a minute with the Wake Up Woking thing. But yeah, it's always been the Weller family. You know, Anne and John have been lovely, and, you know, Nick, and it's been great. The way I look at it is, I remember going to Stanley Road, and I remember talking to Anne the other week about down the alleyway, and I was a footballer, you know, not that good, but I was a footballer at school. But Paul wasn't interested. He was no good at football. So I took that route, and he picked up a guitar, and you could see who'd done the best, you know.
I think you had a really glittering footballing career, Sam, did you not?
Well, no, I tell you what, I had one foot, my left foot, and I also had a long throw. If you know about football, I beat Ian Hutchinson in a long throw competition once. So, yeah, that's my little football claim to fame.
Let's talk John Weller. So, you know, Anne was on episode 100, which feels like ages ago now. It was over a year ago. Goodness me. Was obviously talking so lovingly about John and this boxing career, if you like, the amateur boxer in him. But he was also, I mean, what a hustler. He was working in the building trade, taxi driver, as you say, doing all kinds of things to make ends meet.
Funny enough, he used to box with my wife's Angie's dad as well, at the Woking Boxing Club as well, which is one thing. But there's a fantastic story about John, just as they were about to break into it. They were there or thereabouts, and a friend of ours, really good friend called Ken Caesar, John said to him, he said, "Look, Ken, I'd like to buy your taxi plate off you." He said, "Well, how much?" And he told him it was $3,000 in those days. So Ken won't mind me telling you, because the tax man's forgotten about it, but probably not. So anyway, he said, John went upstairs. This is brilliant. John went upstairs and he said he brought down $3,000 in notes because John was a readies man. Ken said, "John," he said, "can I just ask you, Paul's doing all right." He said, "Can I ask you why you want this taxi?" He said, "Just in case the boy don't make it." And that is fantastic. He was covering his bases, wasn't he?
Yeah. Smart move, man. I mean, you know, it's not easy to get into the music industry, is it? He obviously saw something in him, though, and was like really pushing the three of them to gig and booking them gigs all over Woking and stuff from the Working Men's Club. But then very quickly they get into London. Even the early days of the Jam in London, they're still having to kind of rope in people to get to the gigs, right?
John bowled into the Princess once, and he said, "Right, you lot, Paul's in on Friday," or whenever it was, "Ronnie Scott's coach will be here to pick you up." And I'm sorry, anybody, about John's accent, but that's the way I'll do it. So we all piled on this coach, and we went up to Ronnie Scott's, and it was really good. I mean, it was nice. You walked in, free concert. Somebody said that Shane McGowan was in there, and Shane McGowan said all these soul boys turned up and everything else. But it was John's way of filling out the crowd. People were walking around Soho, and I think that night Tufty went down to see Linda Lewis or somebody like that. It was good, but that was John. John would try everything to get the boys' work, and he was brilliant. We've heard the stories about borrowing somebody's building van, you know, on a Friday night, and then by Monday the guy saying, "I need my van," Monday morning, and they've still got the gear in and everything else. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
The boys are playing Michael's, which was like a gangster club from what I can work out, right?
Yeah. There was a shooting in there. Well, I used to go to Michael's because they used to play soul music as well, and I used to hide because I was sort of underage getting in there. We used to hide from the manager in that. But John got this residency, so, you know, people were there. And great story was the YMCA gig, which you've probably heard a couple of things about, Paul getting pissed up and everything else. But, you know, I've got a lovely story about John where a young lad come into the Red House, you know, at the pub in Woking. I'd finished work, having a couple of beers, and he said, "Oh, can you tell me where this is? Apparently the Jam are playing there." And I went, "Oh, I didn't know about it. Playing as John's Boys, I think. Somebody will correct it. He hasn't got a ticket. What can he do?" And I just said, "Well, look, I live near there. I'm going to walk past there. Come on, I'll try and get you in." So I walked down there with him, and John was outside. I said, "Hello, John. Sorry, mate. This guy's come all the way from Kingston, hasn't got a ticket. Any chance of getting him in?" And he went, "Sorry, Sammy." He said, "Nah, all full up, mate." And it was a tiny little place, 100 people, whatever. And the bloke said, "Oh, thanks for trying," and trundled off. And I said, "John, See you later, mate. Have a good evening. So I got 10 yards down the road and he said, oi, Sammy, if you and Angie want to come back, see you later. So I went back and got Angie and brought her back there.
This other poor sod's walking home.
Yeah, the thing was, that was the infamous gig where Paul was pissed because they all went down the Anchor in Perford all afternoon and it was not good. That was John to a T, to be honest with you. He was such a diamond. I used to see John, not every day, but virtually every day, because I worked in the carpet shop opposite the Midland Bank where John used to bank. Now, John being John was the only person that would just roll up in his Jag and park, because there was no motors, but John would just go park outside there, get out of the car, leather jacket, briefcase. I'd be sometimes at the door, he'd say, hello, Sammy, bang, and whatever. And then one day he come over and he said, oh, Sammy, Paul's got a flat in London. I need some carpet. He said, I'll send you up there in a cab. You measure it. He said, I don't want no fucker knowing where he lives. He put me in a cab. He sent me up there, gave me some cash as well, which is lovely. I measured it up. Gary Crowley told me this flat was in Pimlico. I couldn't remember. But he had this one studio flat and it was an emerald green carpet. And I remember my first flat, I had the same carpet but in brown. So, it's an American carpet. And that was the start of Sammy, the Queller's Carpet Man. You know, I've carpeted John's houses, Paul's house. He even got me up to Stanhope Place, you know, the other studio. You know, again, sometimes there's people walking about, I didn't have a bloody clue who they were. And that's the other thing, you know, Paul's always been quite loyal to people who look after him and people he knows. That was really nice. Sadly, at John's funeral, sad occasion, but there was loads of people there and whatever. It was a lovely turnout, beautiful service and everything else. At the hotel afterwards, there was Max Beasley, and I didn't have a clue why he was there, whatever. And I said to Nick and Anne, I said, oh, you know, I've seen this guy on the telly. Who is he? And I think Anne said, oh, Maxie, can you have a word with Sammy, our carpet man? So I introduced myself to Max Beasley. We were all, you know, waxing lyrical about John and his story about being paid cash, top of the pops, everything else. It just showed what a lovely man he was, John. You know, he was brilliant. And the other thing on that day, I'm sure Nicky won't mind me saying it, but we got asked to leave because it got a bit rowdy, you know. So, and I phoned her the following day and said, your dad would have loved that.
You're seeing the rise of the Jam and it getting bigger, and they're doing the residency at the Cow in London. And I mean, you're seeing them on top of the pops and that. It must be like a weird feeling to suddenly see your mate on the telly and hitting the number one spot, surely.
Well, yeah, it was, yeah, but, you know, they were busy, they were working, so you didn't see them all the time. You know, my wife went out drinking with them more than I did. Didn't really see them much. When we got married, Anne and John were invited to the wedding, but the boys were off touring. But that was it, that infamous year 82, you know. Everybody was crying that year, but I got married. I suppose we were both upset, I suppose, yeah.
They were touring all the time. They were in the studio making singles and albums. So you kind of got to go out with them as mates because they're just on this conveyor belt, on this hamster wheel.
No, I've learned over the years, you don't interrupt somebody on their job. I wouldn't want to try and see Paul when they're recording because that's intense work and everything else. You know, a lot of people don't realise that, you know, you just wouldn't want to interrupt them. If you meet them and you're having a coffee or a chat, it's really good. But when they're concentrating, it is work. And
I would imagine the Style Council were more your bag musically.
Yeah, I suppose they were. But again, it wasn't. I never went to see the Style Council. We were still keeping in touch with Anne and John. I suppose we got married. We did our own thing. You know, you drift off a bit there, really. It's always nice to say, oh, blimey, you know, we know that guy and everything else. That's really nice to do, you know, when you see him on top of the pops or, hang on a minute, you know, my birthday, 85, and you got Rick Parfitt from Woking and Paul Weller, and you think, wow, this is great, you know, Live Aid.
Is that your birthday? What a lovely present.
Yeah, it was my birthday. I was working, but yeah, it was great. Woking opened it, you know, with Status Quo and then Style Council. It was brilliant. Funny little story on that. I don't think Paul liked all that and all the others up their own backsides or whatever. But the other day, Geldof said, you know, they're doing a play, right? And they're not getting everybody in to play bits and pieces. It's just a story of Live Aid, but they're getting someone to sing. And the funny thing was, he said, oh, the bloke who plays me actually sings really well. I felt like saying, well, that can't be hard with his singing. Another story, which I love, I think is great. Do you remember when Bruce used to manage the Vapors?
Oh, yeah.
Bruce and John. They were number 2 or something, and John came home one day and said, what's the matter? What's the matter? He said, well, I don't know. He says, I don't know what to tell the boy if the other group go to number 1 above him. Lovely people, mate.
Let's talk about charity. So this is something that's been important to you for so long now, that you're often raising money for charity. We're talking, sponsored walks. We're talking golf days. I've seen fishing things, the London Marathon, these cycle rides. What's the driver?
I suppose firstly, it's because I'm able to do all these sporty things and I love a challenge. When you're getting someone to sponsor you on cycling or running a marathon, they got to trust they get nothing in return. In 2009, I think, when I had this, and it was a dream, believe it or not, it was a dream to ask Paul to play a gig. We had gone to a pub in Woking called the Cricketers. We'd arranged to meet Anne there, and Enzo Esposito was playing with his band, the 516s. I always joke with Anne, get Paul out with us for a drink, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't drink now. This time, she said, he wants to see you because he needs some carpet down the barn. And it was just a little bit of matting for the accountant's office. So I went down Monday and I'd had this idea in my head. I had always dreamed of this thing. So I'd done my homework and I'd got it in my head, and I went in there and he just finished Wake Up the Nation. So they're all in the studio, finalising everything else, or whatever you do. You'll find out I know cack all about music, but there you go. And Paul made me a cup of tea, and I thought, I have not got a better opportunity to ask him than now. He's relaxed, he's making me a cup of tea, and I just said, mate, the hospice is in trouble. Any chance you could do a gig sometime in Woking? I've got a venue. I told him what we charge, how many people, everything else. Andy Crofts walked past. I thought, oh, God, I might as well go for it. I said, oh, hello, introduce me and whatever. And I said, do you fancy playing Woking? And he went, yeah, why not? Bang. That was it. Paul said, look, I'm a bit busy, mate. So I went and did my carpet stuff. Got some business out of that as well. He said, put it on a letter, which, I got this letter and I sent it to Paul, said where the venue would be, everything else. Basically, I was doing this, and a friend of mine, Vic Falsetta, he helped me out on it quite a lot. Wake Up Woking was born. I mean, I got the name because it was a play on Wake Up the Nation.
And Woking Hospice, for you, that had a real personal connection as well, right?
Yeah. Sadly, my mum had died in there. They looked after her really well right up to the last minute. And, in the programme, they let people leave the world with care and dignity. And, that's what they did. Nothing was too much trouble. We didn't know what a hospice was before. We knew Angie's uncle died in there, but we didn't know. And what a place. But again, without getting too political, hospices are charities. Governments are crap. They're not funded, everything else. So everybody still trying to spend their hard-earned. As you say, I've done fishing, or my brother did the fishing. Last weekend, my daughter did skydive for the hospice. Every time people are doing challenges and everything else. It was really funny because I thought nothing of it and sent him this letter. And a few weeks later, I was at work. I was still working, and there's a phone call. And I went to my mate. I went, "Oh shit, it's Paul Weller." So, hello, mate, all right? And he said, yeah. He said, Sammy, I've got a date for you. Saturday, the 5th of June, after our gig, we're playing Aylesbury the day before. It's the end of a tour, Saturday, the 5th of June. I went, oh, shit. I said, I'm on holiday then. He said, no, you won't go on holiday. There's that great big volcano cloud in the sky. Do you remember that? Over Iceland.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that? Couple of months before. So he said, you fucking won't go on holiday. Cut a long story short, I then went to the leisure centre. This is brilliant, this bit. I then went to the leisure centre. I said to the guy, Stuart, I knew really well. I said, Stu, I've got a date. I've got Paul Weller. We've talked about it. Saturday the 5th. He said, I can't do it. I said, mate, this is Paul Weller. He said, I cannot do it. He said, I'm not cancelling a five-a-side tournament for this.
So nearly didn't happen.
So,
oh, my God.
No, it nearly didn't happen. I got back on the phone to Paul, and he was in a car with everybody going to, I think they were going in between radio stations and things like that. And I thought, oh, shit, what do I say? I said, Paul, I'm really sorry, mate. I said, they can't do that. He just shouted out to the guys in the car. He said, Sammy can't do the Saturday. How about the Sunday? And luckily, they all said yes, whoever it was. So thank you very much to them. But to be honest with you, and again, I'm so indebted to Paul because he kept the whole crew. He kept the stagehands, the people putting everything up and all the things, the catering, everything. It was just amazing for that extra day. He was touring the next year and he said to this guy we know in Worthing, he said, I saw you at Woking, it's a great gig. He said, yeah, that fucking Sammy made me work on a Sunday.
And I mean, what an achievement, because that was the first time he performed in Woking since the Jam days.
Yes, it was. Yeah. That was the whole thing. I mean, to be honest with you, I had the golden ticket. You know, if you ever want to do a gig, just make sure your heart's all right. You know, it was 1,200 people, you know, £50 a head. I was going around, or we were going around to Anne's a few times, asking for advice. And one thing Anne said to me, which was lovely, she said, Sammy, no hangers on, no guest list. I said, all right, Anne, all right. Paul could have asked a couple of people. He asked some bloke in, which I didn't know was coming, a guy called Foxton, but I didn't even know he was turning up, you know. Being a salesman, I always used to have a saying that people buy from people. You know, I was going around beg, stealing, borrowing. We knew the local printer. He said, do a programme, get some advertising in it. That'll pay for it. We didn't have to pay for the programme, the posters, the tickets, because that was covered by the advertising, which paid him off, which meant that every penny we earned came to the hospice. That was my sort of driving force, and it was really good. I was doing cash deals for the blimmin' stage and, you know, whatever. Sorry, tax man, it's all gone now. There was all these things. The poor lady at the hospice, Mary Lacey, lovely lady, she said, I don't want to know, you know, everything else. It just worked like a dream, and we maximise what we do. The other thing, if you remember, I was in Italy the other week and saw your Moody T-shirts, yeah?
Yeah, this was, I think I mentioned this on the podcast, actually. So this was outside the gig when you get all the bootleggers. There was somebody bootlegging my T-shirt, my logo, right?
Yeah. But yeah, so anyway, just to let you know, because I work closely with Paul's people, I had to jump through hoops. So we asked for a T-shirt. We had to go to the parent company Bravado to get it okayed. It was all done properly. And there's no way I wanted to upset them. I wanted to do it by the book. You know, somebody sitting outside Lido de Jezero selling your T-shirts for 20 quid, which he's paid 3 quid for, or whatever, which I'm not saying 3 quid, but they can have it if they want to. I was doing it properly, or we were doing it properly. That's why now, you know, I never do anything for me. It's always been for the charity.
We should mention the fact that, so the gig was Sunday, June the 6th, 2010, the first Wake Up Woking. And we should mention John Weller, because John had passed away just the previous April 2009, right?
Yeah, bless him. There's a couple of things on that. I get quite emotional, and I was going to see Anne, and, you know, she was always putting me right and everything else. And we were debating whether I introduced Paul on stage, whether or not I introduced them as welcome to the best fucking band in the world or whatever. And in the end, because it wasn't a Jam, I didn't, but there's a lovely photo of me and Paul, which Hannah took 5 minutes before we went on stage. And I've got a beer in my hand, he's got a fag. He said, are you shitting yourself? I said, too bloody right, mate. I just got on the stage, the crowd were there, and I just said, thanks for all coming. This is dedicated to John. 30 years ago, that man was going around Woking saying, Paul's playing here, Paul's playing there. Please welcome Paul Weller, and that was it. You know, the rest is history. It was a great thing. Paul said it was a homecoming in sorts of ways. Yeah, it was. The people from Woking, it was lovely. And, you know, even in Jezero the other day, my wife Angie had one of the T-shirts on, and this guy sat next to us. He said, I've got one of them. And Ange said, I probably sold you that. Lovely. You know, cut a long story short, on that thing, it nearly killed me, to be honest with you. And during that night, it was a relief. I did ask Paul he doesn't do it. I said, could you do a dedication? And bless him, he was there, and he said, I don't do dedications, but this is for Sam and his lovely wife, Angie, and he's saying, you do something to me. I went running over to Ange, because she was still trying to sell merch and, you know, whatever. We started dancing, and I just burst into tears. And I just said, we did it. That was it. As they say in the football, you know, played 1-1-1, and that was it for me. He was brilliant. We raised on that night, or that day, we raised over 62 grand for hospice, which was fantastic. God bless Vic, he's carried it on. Yeah, he's got other people playing for him or whatever. The total's gone over to over 100,000 now. Well done to him. You know, I couldn't think where else you could go above Paul. To get someone playing in their hometown, get McCartney playing in Liverpool, maybe, but yeah, I couldn't top it. I just couldn't top it.
A couple of other really special things about this gig. So Steve Brookes is involved. He's supporting, original member of the Jam with Paul Weller in 1972. And Bruce Foxton, of course, bass player with the Jam, rocks up as well. Tell me about this.
This was really weird because I kept in touch with Claire, who's Paul's manager, and I said, Claire, sorry, there's an article in The Sun saying that Bruce is going to be playing with Paul. And I said, I haven't spread that rumour, I haven't spread it because I didn't want, somebody pull the plug and all that. So anyway, we got to the gig and all of a sudden I see Bruce hanging over the curtains looking out at Brooksy. I went, hello, mate, what are you doing here? And, that was it. What a thing, because I just sensed that was, Paul did it for Woking. He played 8 Jam songs. He got Bruce, Steve Brookes and himself all on stage at one thing. That was a beautiful moment, and yeah, it was lovely. One other story I really must tell you because it's important to me, and as I said, I went to the Shearwater Youth Club. The guy who used to run Shearwater Youth Club was a guy called Dave Strike. He was fantastic. Everybody, there could be effing and blind and whatever, but he kept a tidy ship, and I don't think they ever forgot him. So I sourced out him and his wife, I think her name was Betty or something, or forgive me if I got the wrong name. But so I found out where he was and said, look, would you like to be guest of honour? Paul's playing Woking, come and have a look at the gig. What a lovely thing was, I was in back and forth backstage, and I said, oh, Paul, I've got Dave and his wife from Shearwater. He said, bring them in. And I brought them in, and they've got this lovely photograph of Paul, Bruce, and them two. To me, that was special because there's the guy who started it all. I'll be honest with you, Dave Strike said to me a few weeks later, he gave me an LP, I think it was in the City LP, that they gave him saying thanks for what he'd done. He gave me that to raffle off for the hospice.
Oh, nice.
Lovely, man. Lovely.
Let's talk about Wildwood. So this is not the album, although that is a lovely conversation always. I'll always have that conversation. But let's talk about the Wildwood Garden. So this was your idea to, I guess, rework and rename the garden at Woking Hospice. COVID put it on hold for a bit. So March 2022, this happens, right?
Yeah. Basically, again, oh God, I mean, now I've hung up my boots, as to say, to be honest with you. So, Paul, it's all right, mate. I'm not going to ask you any more favours because I can't. The hospice again were in trouble. I went down to see him and said, oh, the hospice is in trouble. They're always in fucking trouble, which is true. And I said, look, mate, I'm not looking for any money. I'm not looking for you to play a gig. I just want you to open a garden and let's make some awareness of it there. And, hopefully we'll sell some merchandise. Steve Wheatley helped me out with all that. So we just made some money to do the garden. It did take probably a couple of years to do it. And I remember once I said, oh, sorry to bother you again, Paul. And he said, look, I'm finishing a tour in December. Give me a shout, then I'll do it. And then all of a sudden I phoned him up and I'll message him actually. And he said, oh, sorry, mate, I got COVID. So he couldn't do then. And then he said, January, February, definitely. It was fantastic because Paul said to me, he said, look, Sam, he said, I don't want it to be a circus. And I said, Paul, it's a hospice, mate. People are dying. He said, yeah, I don't want loads of people, whatever. So he said he wanted one photographer. So I thought, well, who do I know? Derek D'Souza. I told Tufty to come. Steve was helping me with the merchandise. So Steve went and picked up Paul. Little did we know he was picking up Anne as well. Paul turned up. And he was brilliant. He was lovely with the staff, taking photos. We're being as diplomatic as we could with the masks and things like that. He signed loads of stuff. He had loads of time for people. Yeah, it was brilliant. And just as he left, I remember he gave me a hug and I said, I can't thank you enough, mate. Do you know what he said? He said, I'm sorry it took so long. And I just thought, what a man. He's just brilliant. I think we've raised another 10K or something on that. All goes in the same pot with the hospice, and we're still plugging away. He had, sadly, Paul had a friend die in there last year. He's seen firsthand what they do and everything else. And, once you're touched by some place like that, it's quite moving. I always say I've done a few talks on stuff like that for charity. £1 is better than nothing. And, and also awareness, if people know. And the hospice is not where people die; it's where people go. They're going for well-being and counselling and all those sort of things. And it's a place. I mean, we go there for coffees now. I won't give Costa Coffee my money. I'd rather give it to the hospice because I know there it goes. I can't thank Paul enough. He is a top man, and really good. So, I can't tell you which record's on which album or anything like that. All I know, he's a top man and a good friend who's helped me out with charity stuff. Forever beholden to him.
Hey, look, man, this has been so lovely. I will put in the show notes details of the Wildwood Garden, details of how people can donate, and merchandise is still on sale, so they can buy that or they can donate directly and stuff like that. So we'll put that all in the show notes for the podcast. One thing I'd love to do, Sam, we have show notes. We have a website that accompanies every episode of the podcast. What I'd love to do is put like a gallery of the carpets of Paul Weller over the years. Are those things you've saved? Could you tell us what he's had?
Do you want one?
Here we go. Look, it's sales technique now. Look.
Dude, no. Do you know the Lawrence Watson picture with him sitting on the floor with a teddy bear on the brown shag pole carpet? Yeah. I sold him that. Brilliant. So there's one. Do you know in that house in Send, he had a swimming pool outside, and I used to go out measuring up and everything else. You know, Lee and Natty, they had bedrooms upstairs, a little spiral staircase. But I'll tell you this, mate, in the lounge, there was a scooter on a metal plate, and on the wall was all the Stanley Road logos. It was amazing. True story. Anne said to me, she said, Sammy, what do you sell him that fucking carpet? She says, he's got candles because he had candles all over the house. There was candle wax all over it. It was a nightmare. Absolute nightmare.
So the other week on my social media channels, you were in Italy. Paul Weller solo live. You seem to be at a lot of gigs seeing Weller solo. The solo years and more recently is really a big thing for you in terms of his music.
Yeah, I think I just love the style. I mean, it was, somebody put on that it was 5 years since the Festival Hall. I mean, what a gig.
Yeah, that was
what
great.
A beautiful gig, it was just lovely. I suppose it's because we're that age. Most of the records I like of Paul's are slow records, but then you listen to, we listened to Style Council the other day, me and Ange, and we're just thinking, wow, this is just, the man's a genius. And, then you go back to the Jam stuff, and he is the changing man, and, long may it last. And I hope he don't hang up his boots soon, because I think he's still got a lot to offer, By the way, my God, Italy was fantastic. Imagine it, you're on a beach and 10 minutes later you're in a gig. You can't do that anywhere in England or whatever. It was just brilliant. Please don't shout out Brighton to me because it wasn't sunny.
I was going to say Cliff Pavilion, Southend-on-Sea, yeah.
But the only other thing was, sadly, my wife fainted at one of the gigs.
Paul can have that effect on the ladies, right?
Yeah, he did, because basically the second time she was put on a stretcher, taken out of the back and given an ECG and everything else. And I saw Bill Wheeler and I said, Bill, do you mind if we just sit here? And because I wanted to listen to the end of the gig. So Anne sat on a chair for half an hour, and we listened to the back and the encores and everything else. As they come running out, Paul went past, took a double take and said, fucking hell, what are you doing here? And he gave Ange a lovely hug and heard that she'd been ill the day before, get her a drink and a cup of tea or something like that. And it was lovely, and they were all nice. But it took me back to your podcast with Bill, because I said about it, where they come off and they are like a family. So that was nice that they were all together and going back on the coach, because every night of those gigs was like a team winning the Champions League, because they deserved the plaudits and everything else. It was mega. It's brilliant.
Hey, look, two final questions for you before you go, Sam. You're allowed one Paul Weller song for the rest of your life. It can be the Jam, the Style Council, or solo. What would you go with?
Well, at this present moment in time, we both love Moving On. Two stories to that. When Ange left work, she was a teaching assistant. The lady there Googled a Paul Weller song. Ange was at assembly with all his school kids, and all of a sudden this song come on, and she said, I know this song. And it was Moving On. And it's just lovely. And I've even got a sign that Pete Carver did for me at the bottom of the garden, which says, I've got love all around. I don't need nothing else, which is great. But interestingly, we were with Paul a few weeks ago, and I do try and catch him if he's sitting there having a coffee with us, with his mum or something. I just say, Paul, can you just tell me about Moving On? And he said, Sam, it's what you interpret it. And I said, sorry, mate, but I can see that as being some people's funeral songs. He said, it's what people make of it. And to be honest with you, you could say that about anything. I mean, the other song I would have said, because we're in Ripley a lot, is Village. That man, he says, here I am, and he's in that village, and he's making wonderful music. So he must be happy there,
Love it. Right, final question. So the purpose of this podcast, Sam, is to meet lovely people like yourself who have had these connections, these stories to share around Paul Weller. But as you know, my one big regret from giving up my radio career was that I never got to interview Paul Weller. So I've created a podcast to make it happen. Stupid bloody idea, but there we go. If it happens, Sam, what should I ask him?
If you want to give me the questions, I could probably ask him first because I might see him before you.
I'll just pass them on.
Yeah, to be perfectly honest with you, I'd just give him a big hug and thank him. Thank him for all the friendships he's made. All the people. I wouldn't know you. I wouldn't know half the people. Making people happy. The people in Italy, you know, the night before having dinner, we were with somebody. I've never seen him. I just said, believe it. Just go there early. And they're there with beaming smiles, with their arm around Paul and things like that. The man has made some great friendships, lifelong friendships, and there are a few wrong uns in there, but there's few wrong uns in anything. But if it was me, I'd just shake his hand and say, thank you, mate. You've made some lovely friends. As Tufty says to me, he said, he's a spider, and we're all caught in that web.
What a great way to finish. Sam Molnar, thank you so much for your company, man. Really enjoyed chatting with you.
Yeah, nice to speak to you, mate. Take care.
Well, there you go. My thanks once again to Sam Molnar for joining me on the podcast. You can find out more details about the Wildwood Garden at Woking Hospice, Wake Up Woking, and their friendship 50 years plus on my website. Just go to paulwellerfanpodcast.com and check out the show notes for this episode. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, then do spread the word on social media. At the time of recording, we are number 1 in the UK. We are top 40 in Japan, Australia, and America. Crazy, I know. And if you've enjoyed it, what you've heard, I'll ask you 2 things, okay? 1, for this episode, please do donate to Woking Hospice. You'll find the links in the show notes for this episode of the podcast. And if more generally you'd like to support the podcast, we'd love you to buy a virtual coffee. It's only £3. You can sign up for one. You can sign up for a regular subscription. Entirely up to you. Just head to the store on my website. And please do spread the word on social media. Let's get this in the Paul Weller fan forums, the Jam, the Style Council, Paul Weller Solo, social media, Facebook, Instagram, X, Threads, whatever you want to do. Really appreciate it. And make sure you follow, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and more. On the next episode coming up, the incredible story of Carleen Anderson on the podcast. An epic, epic chat. You may need to do this one in 2 sittings, folks, on the next episode. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.